Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, Chapter 3, The Link Up. Inside the Great Glass Elevator, there was also a good deal of excitement. Charlie and Mr. Wonka and all the others could see clearly the huge silvery shape of the Space Hotel USA about a mile ahead of them, and behind them was the smaller, but pretty enormous, commuter capsule. The Great Glass Elevator, not looking all that great now beside these two monsters, was in the middle. And of course, everybody, even Grandma Josephine, knew very well what was going on. They even knew that the three astronauts in charge of the commuter capsule were called Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler. The whole world knew about these things. Newspapers and television had been shouting about almost nothing else for the past 6 months. Operation Space Hotel was the event of the century. "What a load of luck!" cried Mr. Wonka. "We've landed ourselves slap in the middle of the biggest space operation of all time." "We've landed ourselves in the middle of a nasty mess," said Grandma Josephine. "Turn back at once." "No, Grandma," said Charlie. "We've got to watch it now. We must see the commuter capsule linking up with the Space Hotel." Mr. Wonka floated right up close to Charlie. "Let's beat them to it, Charlie," he whispered. "Let's get there first and go aboard the Space Hotel ourselves." Charlie gaped. Then he gulped. Then he said softly, "It's impossible. You've got to have all sorts of special gadgets to link up with another spacecraft, Mr. Wonka." "My elevator could link up to a crocodile if it had to," said Mr. Wonka. "Just leave it to me, my boy." "Grandpa Joe!" cried Charlie. "Did you hear that? We're going to link up with the Space Hotel and go on aboard." "Yippee!" shouted Grandpa Joe. "What a brilliant thought, sir! What a staggering idea!" He grabbed Mr. Wonka's hand and stared at it, and started shaking it like a thermometer. "Be quiet, you balmy old bat," said Grandma Josephine. "We're in hot enough stew already. I want to go home." "Me too," said Grandma Georgina. "What if they come after us?" said Mr. Bucket, speaking for the first time. "What if they capture us?" said Mrs. Bucket. "What if they shoot us?" said Grandma Georgina. "What if my beard were made of green spinach?" cried Mr. Wonka. "Bunkum and tummy root. You'll never get anywhere if you go about what-ifing like that. What if Columbus had discovered America and said, 'What if I sink on the way over? What if I meet pirates? What if I never come back?' He wouldn't have even started. We want no what-ifers around here. Right, Charlie? Off we go then. But wait, this is a very tricky maneuver. I'm going to need help. We have to press lots of buttons, all in different parts of the elevator. I shall take those two over there, the white and the black." Mr. Wonka made a funny blowing noise with his mouth and glided effortlessly, like a huge bird, across the elevator to the white and black buttons. There he hovered. "Grandpa Joe, sir, kindly station yourself beside the silver button there. Yes, that's the one. And you, Charlie, go up and stay floating beside that golden little button near the ceiling. I must tell you that each of these buttons fires booster rockets from different places outside the elevator. That's how we change direction. Grandpa Joe's rockets turn us starboard to the right. Charlie's turn us to port, to the left. Mine make us go higher or lower, or faster or slower. All ready?" "No, wait!" cried Charlie, who was floating exactly midway between the floor and the ceiling. "How do I get up? I can't get up to the ceiling." He was thrashing his arms and legs violently, like a drowning swimmer, but getting nowhere. "My dear boy," said Mr. Wonka, "you can't swim in this stuff. This isn't water, you know. It's air, and it's very thin air at that. There's nothing to push against, so you have to use jet propulsion. Watch me first. First you take a deep breath. Then you make a small round hole with your mouth, and you blow as hard as you can. If you blow downward, you jet propel yourself up. If you blow left, you shoot off to the right, and so on. You maneuver yourself like a spacecraft, but using your mouth as a booster rocket." Suddenly, everyone began practicing this business of flying about, and the whole elevator was filled with blowings and snortings of passengers. Grandma Georgina, in her red flannel nightgown with two skinny bare legs sticking out of the bottom, was trumpeting and spitting like a rhinoceros and flying from one side of the elevator to the other, shouting, "Out of my way! Out of my way!" and crashing into poor Mr. and Mrs. Bucket with terrible speed. Grandpa George and Grandma Josephine were doing the same. And well, you may wonder what the millions of people down on Earth were thinking as they watched this crazy happenings on their television screens. You must realize they couldn't see things very clearly. The great glass elevator was only about the size of a grapefruit on their screens, and the people inside were slightly blurred through the glass, were no bigger than the pits of the grapefruit. Even so, the watchers below could see them buzzing about wildly, like insects in a glass box. "What in the world are they doing?" shouted the President of the United States, staring at the screen. "Looks like some kind of war dance, Mr. President," answered the astronaut Schouler over the radio. "You mean they're Indians?" said the President. "I didn't say that, sir." "Oh, yes, you did, Schouler." "Oh, no, I didn't, Mr. President." "Silence," said the President. "You're muddling me up." "Get back in the elevator," Mr. Wonka was saying. "Please, please, do stop flying about. Keep still, everyone, so we can get on with the docking." "You miserable old mackerel," said Grandma Georgina, sailing past him. "Just when we start having a bit of fun, you want to stop it." "Look at me, everybody," shouted Grandma Josephine. "I'm flying. I'm a golden eagle." "I can fly faster than any of you," cried Grandpa George, whizzing around and round in his nightgown, billowing out behind him like the tail of a parrot. "Grandpa George!" cried Charlie. "Please calm down. If we don't hurry, these astronauts will get there before us. Don't you want to see inside the Space Hotel, any of you?" "Out of my way!" shouted Grandma Georgina, blowing herself back and forth. "I'm a jumbo jet." "You're a balmy old bat," said Mr. Wonka. In the end, the old people grew tired and out of breath, and everyone settled quietly into a floating position. "All set, Charlie and Grandpa Joe, sir?" said Mr. Wonka. "All set, Mr. Wonka," Charlie answered, hovering near the ceiling. "I'll give the orders," said Mr. Wonka. "I'm the pilot. Don't fire your rockets until I tell you. And don't forget who is who. Charlie, you're port. Grandpa Joe, you're starboard." Mr. Wonka pressed one of his own two buttons, and immediately booster rockets began firing underneath the great glass elevator. The elevator leaped forward, but swerved violently to the right. "Hard apart!" yelled Mr. Wonka. Charlie pressed his button. His rockets fired. The elevator swung back into line. "Steady as you go!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Starboard 10 degrees! Steady! Steady! Keep her there!" Soon they were hovering directly underneath the tail of the enormous Silvery Space Hotel. "You see that little square door with the bolts on it?" said Mr. Wonka. "That's the docking entrance. It won't be long now." "Port of fraction! Steady! Starboard a bit! Good, good! Easy does it! We're nearly there!" To Charlie, it felt as though they were in a tiny rowboat underneath the stern of the biggest ship in the world. The Space Hotel towered over them. It was enormous. "I can't wait," thought Charlie, "to get inside to see what it's like."